What's up, Wingnuts? It's me, the Delta W. And I'm in the mood to play an unspecified game that requires a D-pad. But what controller should I use? Pro controller? D-pad's okay, but not the best. Joy-Con? I mean, what's a D-pad? And, of course, the beloved GameCube controller with the D-pad made for elves. So, none of these controllers are really great for playing in 2D. I mean, this has an okay D-pad, but not great. But if you really want to use a D-pad in a game, and you feel that passionate about it, then I'd recommend using the SF30 Pro by 8bitdo.
In my opinion, and probably in most people's, there's two main draws to, this controller. One is the fact that it's obviously modeled after the Super NES controller with 2 C sticks and extra R buttons, along with 2 extra buttons, home and screenshot. And also the fact that it has a really nice D-pad, good for 2D games. And since, the Switch Pro controller and the Joy-Cons don't have the best D-pads, this is a pretty good second choice. And I have to say, yeah, it's a pretty nice choice. In fact, I don't know, I might even think it's one of the best D-pads that I ever used. It's pretty nice. The quality of the controller is really pretty close to the your average Super NES controller, I guess. And while it is extremely close in design, there's a few differences. The buttons are shifted up, you have to make room for all the different buttons. So even though the whole controller build is around the same design, buttons are moved around, it's not going to be the exact same. But even then, it stands out in itself as a great controller. I mean, it's basically just what would happen if you took the PlayStation controller and took off, the grips. And yeah, if that's probably who this is going to appeal to most people who want to use a Super NES controller, on their Switch. And speaking of that, it's not only usable on Switch, but several other things. You can hook it up to your phone, you can hook it up to your computer. It's usable on several different devices. The setup is a little bit spotty though. Each one has a little bit of a code, I guess. It's not really a code because it's 2 inputs, but still. And it can even be used on the Super NES Classic, but you're going to need an adapter for it. So you can't just plug it in or try to sync it to your Super NES Classic. So if you're into that, yeah, that's something you can try. I could go over, exactly how the controller feels, but since most people buying an SNES or one of these controllers has already used the Super NES one, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. It does feel a lot like that, but I actually I guess that this one feels a little bit better. It kind of cradles your fingers a little bit better. You know how your finger kind of wraps around it. It feels a little bit better in itself, at least in my opinion. But yeah, it's pretty solid controller when it comes to the way you handle it. Another thing you might want to, think about is the fact that it actually comes in 2 designs, the SF30 Pro and the SN. I chose the SF because I think it looks cooler. And it costs, I believe, $45. So yeah, it's not like, your $20 controller. It's a decent amount of money, but it's worth it, really. Really good controller. One thing I actually forgot about, because it really doesn't matter that much, it might matter to some people. The buttons on it are not concave and convex, like with the original Super NES. Like, obviously that doesn't really matter, but it definitely will matter to, someone who's really used to that on the original Super Nintendo controller. I haven't played an original Super Nintendo. I have the classic version, and it is a nice detail having convex and concave, but that's really all it is. It serves no purpose. They thought it would because apparently they thought that the players, like people who played it, wouldn't be able to tell which button it is. I don't think it would be that hard considering it's just 4 buttons, but it was nice, and I honestly don't know why they never tried using it again. They did it with C sticks, but other than that, just a small detail. But yeah, I mean, this is a controller that can appeal both to people who've used the Super NES controller and someone who hasn't.
Okay, here we are on Rayman Legends. Great game, by the way. I'm just gonna press the button and show you. There's no lag. Really nice. Let's see. You got all your basic directions. You can also use these, of course. You can use the back buttons. They work pretty nice, especially considering they don't change the shape of the controller at all. So yeah, the only time I remember actually having lag was in handheld, and I might show you that too. Okay, here we are in handheld mode, and I don't know if you can see Rayman. So there he is down there. Let me see if it has any lag. It does it right now, but I remember, I don't know if this was specifically in Smash Bros. I was playing Smash Bros. Handheld with my friend, and I was actually using this controller. And maybe it was because I was doing a handheld with local co-op on handheld. But it did have noticeable lag. Here it seems fine, though. Maybe it's just because I can't tell as much because Smash Bros. Is a much more specific game. But yeah, there will be a little bit of lag in certain occasions. Okay, so here we are in Odyssey. And, I'm playing. It can obviously do the job. The sticks are great. Responsive, all that. You can do all that. You can even use motion control, which is great. There's rumble, but it's not HD. That's probably one of the main problems I have. The rumble is not HD. So you're not gonna have that level of just like really good. What's the word I'm looking for? Immersion that you have with like Joy-Cons Pro controllers. So I'm gonna ground pound. I don't know if you guys can tell or hear it, but it's ground pounding has a decent rumble compared to where I jump around. It has no rumble, and with Joy-Cons and all, it has just a little bit. Also, there's no rumble for when you shake it and all that. So none of that. But yeah, there is motion control, so you can use it in games like Splatoon. Good motion controls. That's nice. There's rumble, just not HD. Not a super big deal. Another thing you can't do is use amiibos. Like this dude right here. You can't use amiibos. That's kind of expected with third-party controllers. No amiibo function. So if you have amiibos, you're gonna have to use a Joy-Con or a Pro controller or something like that. So I guess that's kind of a problem, but it's not a big deal. Here's another thing. So you can turn it off by holding down home button, hitting off. but you can't turn it back on. You can't do that. You can do it with like this Pro controller right here. Got my Pro controller. You can use this, turn it back on. I think it's not doing it. Okay, there we go. It's back on. So you can do it with that, but you cannot do it with this. Once it's on, you can get the menu back up, but you can't use it to turn it on, and that kind of stinks. Okay, it's loading. Just a second. There we go. So yeah, you can't do that. Not a super big deal. It's a little inconvenient though. So I'm syncing this thing up can be a little annoying sometimes, especially when you've desynced it from your previous thing. Like if I was to use this on a computer and then use it here, you gotta press for this specifically. It's different for each device. Start in Y, and then should be. It takes a little while. See, and it's easy there. I guess it takes a little longer, but besides that, I've had a little bit of trouble when using it to. What am I trying? When I'm. Okay. Now I remember. I have a little bit of trouble when I'm using it. You know, used it on a previous or a different device and then put it back on here. But if you just use it for one device, you shouldn't have a problem.
So I don't have some kind of formula like I do for my game review, so I'm just going to quickly go over what I've already said. Control scheme is great, considering it's just a redesign of the Super NES controller. Well, I do prefer to have the control stick above the D-pad usually. Not as much in this case, since most of the time I use it for 2D games. It might be a problem if you're not playing 2D games, but still. Has a lot of the functions and quality that you'd expect out of a first-party controller instead of a third-party one. Rumble, there's motion controls, all that good stuff. And it is slightly cheaper than a Pro controller, at around $45. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'd rate this controller, extremely critically. Like, I'm not going to give it, like, an 8.5. Actually, I don't know. I guess something like an 8.5 or 8.25 out of 10 would be the best rating. I just don't have any, specific criteria to rate it on. So yeah, I guess this controller gets an 8.25 out of 10, just based on, my opinion. So yeah.
So there's two reasons that anyone would want to get this. The fact that it is basically an enhanced Super NES, controller, and also the fact that it has such a great D-pad. And this D-pad cannot be overstated. It's probably one of the best D-pads I've used. I mean, at least for the movement kind of thing. You might prefer for menus, you might want to use something like the PlayStation's or the anti-D-pad of the Joy-Con. But if you want to use a D-pad for a game like, Sonic Mania, Tetris 99, any of those, then I definitely prefer using this. Well, till next time, keep cool and stay swole.